been concerns about the presidential budget request. The president was proposing zeroing out their work. The science budget was getting reduced by, I believe it was on the order of 50%.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Jared Legget is the president of the Marshall Engineering and Scientists Association, MESA-IFPTE Local 27. We have him on the line calling from a 304 area code, I believe. So let's go ahead and bring him on the air. Jared, thanks for calling into the show.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, and I can hear you. I love saying that every time I get to introduce you to somebody, or every time I talk about the Labor Council, I always mention that the Labor Council has unions representing everybody from grocery store clerks to rocket scientists. And your union is the rocket scientist portion of it. You represent some rocket scientists. And so that's really cool, I think. And so I have a few other questions, but the first one, I guess, is there are a lot of people that when they hear, like, oh, somebody's a rocket scientist, they think that person doesn't deserve, maybe they don't deserve a union, or maybe they don't need a union because they're so special and smart and fancy themselves, and unions are for, like, production workers who have less quote-unquote skills. How do you respond to that as the president of a union of, in part, rocket scientists?
Well, what I usually tell folks at our new employee orientations is if you depend on your employment to be able to pay your bills and sustain yourself, you're working class. And, you got bosses just like everybody else. Sometimes they're nice, sometimes they're not, but they're still bosses. So you still need representation in the workplace. And just because we represent people with PhDs and who are rocket scientists, well, guess what? Some of our bosses also have PhDs and things, so it's not that big discrepancy that people seem to think there might be.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And so let's talk about, your union is a local of a larger international union. The union is the International Federation
Correct.
of Professional and Technical Engineers, IFPTE. What is IFPTE?
IFPTE is an AFL-CIO affiliate. If I remember the history correctly, they used to be the American Federation of Technical Engineers back when Local 27 affiliated with them in 71 after the Apollo era reductions in force. And they represent, professional engineers and scientists at, not only at NASA, there's a Local 27 at Marshall, there's Local 28 at the Glenn Research Center outside of Cleveland, Local 29 at Goddard, Local 30 at the Ames Research Center in California. But there's also a lot of the Navy dockyards are unionized with IFPTE, the Congressional Research Service, the GAO are there. The New Jersey Turnpike has people who are IFPTE affiliates. Local 70 is the National Nonprofit Professionals. If I remember correctly, one of their bargaining units represents people who make Action Network. I believe you're familiar with them. So it's this broad coalition, and the reason why they're called IFPTE instead of AFPTE or something like that is we have several brothers and sisters who are up in Canada as well.
Very cool. And so it's, lots of different sort of sectors represented, but typically the people who are in IFPTE are going to be more white-collar workers. And so it's a union of primarily white-collar workers, like yourself at the and the people that you represent at the Marshall Space Flight Center here in Huntsville, Alabama. I mentioned that rocket scientists are part of your bargaining unit. Who else does your union represent at the Marshall Space Flight Center?
Yeah, so our contract specifies that our bargaining unit is all non-supervisory civil servants with NASA classification code 200 series and 700 series, which largely works out to a NASA job position called an AST, or an Aerospace Science Technical. But I'm looking at our bargaining unit list now. It's mostly aerospace engineers, but we have a lot of flight systems people, We do have a lot of people who do work in labs during the day. We do have some people who do a lot of machining for their work. We have material scientists. We have astrophysicists, heliophysicists, mechanical engineers, astrophysicists. I think I already said that one. Electrical engineers. It's a broad swath of people.
Got a couple of important things to note for folks. You know, many federal workers have had their collective bargaining rights purported to have been taken away by this administration. I think illegally. Those do include some IFPTE locals as well as AFGE locals. But your local at the Marshall Space Flight Center is not among them. Your local retains collective bargaining rights with the Marshall Space Flight Center. Your union contract is still in full effect. Is that right?
That is correct. And the reason why our collective bargaining rights are not being questioned at the moment is because the executive order that was issued back in, I believe it was February, but I may have the date slightly wrong, only affected DoD locals.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Gotcha. I thought there was some non-DoD locals, but maybe that's not the case. But I do remember that NASA was not a part of it. That's for sure.
I'd pull the EO, but I believe it was primarily DoD locals.
Yes, definitely primarily DoD locals. And so that's really important for folks to note. And that's something that, you know, when I was giving new employee orientations and talking to workers when I was out at the Arsenal, you know, I would tell folks that, you know, you are working under this collective bargaining agreement that the union has negotiated that determines, you know, in part the conditions under which you work. So you should really probably be a member of the union and participate in the enforcement of this collective bargaining agreement and maybe the negotiation of a new one if there are some things that you would like to change about your the conditions of your work. And, you know, the union is the place where you can go to address some of those things. How can folks join if they're listening to us and they work at the Marshall Space Flight Center? How can they go and join your union?
So they can reach out to us at IFPTE27@gmail.com. Or if they're listening to this at work for some reason, they can just send me a Teams message, Jared Legget and EV42.
There you go. And you should, I mean, really, you should do that, especially, and, you know, I mean, the dues for your union are, I think, too low. I think you should increase your dues, but I'm not in your union, so I don't get to decide that. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? I don't get to decide your dues because I'm not in your union, and so your dues are very, very low, and you retain collective bargaining rights. Your contract is still in place, and so folks who work at Marshall Space Flight Center, you should probably be a part of the organization that represents you to management and have some sort of say over that. Can you talk to us about what morale is like at Marshall right now?
It's pretty rough. About a month ago was worse. Things seem to have leveled out kind of into a sense of, well, now we just wait and see what happens. As some of your listeners may know, we had a surprise leadership change earlier in the week. There's a new, the news says there's a new an interim administrator for NASA, Mr. Duffy, I believe his name is, who is currently the administrator for the Department of Transportation as well. And it just kind of got posted earlier this week around 6 o'clock on Monday, I believe. And we've not received official notification through official channels yet. Not sure why. You know, but it's kind of been known. There's been concerns about the budget, especially the presidential budget request came out about a month ago, a little bit more. And a lot of our bargaining unit employees saw that the president was proposing zeroing out their work. So we a lot of scientists. The science budget was getting reduced by, I believe it was in the order of 50%. And then a lot of our other employees who don't do human spaceflight work also saw pretty significant reductions at least in the PBR. So a lot of people were believing that their jobs were just going to be cut due to funding. That hasn't officially happened yet. And there's a lot of back and forth. I know you've been seeing with the budget, especially impacting IFPTE locals. And it looks like the Senate may be proposing basically what amounts to a continuation of the FY25 budget, which would be nice if true. But the main thing that's happening right now is the agency has decided for the next couple of weeks to offer voluntary separation incentive packages. So there's voluntary early retirement, voluntary separation incentive payments, which are like a buyout. And then there's round 2 of the DOGE DRP, Deferred Resignation Retirement Plan. And I don't have exact numbers, but the latest I heard in our bargaining unit was we've already had roughly 80 people accept that, which is getting close to about 5% of our bargaining. No, more than 5% of our bargaining unit. What am I doing?
And at one point, at one point, the deferred resignation, the DOGE thing, had a prohibition against serving in the federal government for like 7 years or something. Is that still in the new severance packages?
Not that I have seen. The main thing that's come up is that people are concerned where it has a pretty standard clause actually, as far as like, paperwork for when you're leaving the government.
Like waiving your rights to
says, I agree.
Stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of waiving your rights stuff, which is unfortunately pretty standard language. But I get why it's in there.
Right. The last question that I wanted to ask you about is we've seen a lot of reporting about 270 job cuts at Marshall. Can you explain that number and where that's coming from?
So the number is I want to clarify, these are not job cuts, at least not technically. Right now, I believe that number is people who have accepted one of those voluntary separation incentives. I know now that's our bargaining unit, that's AFGE 1858's bargaining unit, and
management,
people who are not represented and management. I'm aware of a good handful of SESs, that's senior executive service employees, who have accepted one of these options. 270 is a little high compared to what I've seen through our official channels, but it's trending in that direction. I don't know if it's quite that high yet. There's an all hands scheduled for Tuesday that I would encourage all Marshall employees to attend if they can, where management should be giving out more official information, at least on that number. But yeah, right. 200 to 250 is a pretty good estimate so far.
Jared Legget is president of the Marshall Engineering and Scientists Association, IFPTE Local 27. If you have questions for him, you can email ifpte27@gmail.com. Jared, thank you for coming on to the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.